All
right,
let's do this.
You ready?
Yes.
Whenever you're ready, take it away.
Welcome to Tell Me About It, an SLP. What is happening? Maggie, this has happened so many times today. Scratch. This has happened so many times where I've just said syllables in wrong orders and words in wrong order. So we're
at a routine.
I'm on day 3 of snow day. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. Okay.
Yep.
Anyways. Welcome to Tell Me About It, a podcast by SLPs for everybody. My name is Francie.
And my name is Maggie.
And today we are talking about Gestalt Language Processing, kind of what it is, what this means, why were we talking about it, and giving you guys just a little bit, we're just going to tell you about it. That's where we're at.
No, we are we're kind of officially / unofficially in this little series that Francie and I together are calling hot button topics, quote unquote. And it's really just kind of a collection of things that we see come up in the SLP world, but also on social media a lot. And we just kind of hear people talking about a lot. And Gestalt language processing is one of those things that we see a lot. A lot of people are talking about it. So what the heck even is it? Is it real? Is it evidence-based? Is it baloney? Let's talk about it.
We are pulling a lot of our resources from the Informed SLP. They've got 2 really good kind of meta-analyses type thing where they've combined a whole bunch of research articles on topics. They did an original What Is It article in 2022, and then they did a follow-up in 2024 highlighting what has changed over 2 years. So this is, in the grand scheme of things, relatively new to the SLP sphere. This is not something that I learned about in grad school. And Maggie, I think you're the same.
No, yeah, I don't remember this coming up in grad school.
Which makes me feel kind of decrepit. I'm not going to lie to you. It makes me feel old. And I'm like, I didn't graduate that long ago. What do you mean? But
I would also say that while it is true, we didn't graduate that long ago. Things move quickly, but also that just kind of adds credence to this is a relatively new thing, and also the research on it is not like other areas of our field that have decades upon decades upon decades and a body of evidence from which to draw. This has some evidence. It's not completely not evidence-based / made up, but it's new. It's getting there.
It's new. I think it's important to first talk about the fact that we're going to pronounce this probably 2 different ways because I can't get it in my head which way I want to say it. We have the really anglicized Gestalt and then the German Gestalt, and you're going to hear it both ways because I forget which one I say.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. And I'm like that with, sometimes you'll have these conversations with people about oh, what do you say? Do you say pin or pen? Or do you say coupon or coupon or whatever? And in those conversations, I'm always like, I don't know what I say. Okay. I can't think. And now that you've got me thinking about it, I can't be normal. I can't say it in a normal way.
And I feel like this happens to me whenever I get into serious conversations or arguments, even where they're give me an example. And then my mind, it's like a hard reset where it wipes my mind of everything I've ever thought. And I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. We've never had a thought.
I don't know. Who are you? I don't know. And that's me with how we say Gestalt or Gestalt. So
yes.
Anyways.
How do I say caramel or caramel? Not sure.
I don't remember. I can't tell.
Gestalt, or do I say Gestalt? Or do I combine them and say Gestalt?
Which also sometimes happens, okay? Oh man. Anyways, I think it's going to be important to talk about. We're going to do a lot of defining here at the beginning. And so, first of all, the word Gestalt comes from the German word meaning form or shape. And within psychology, because speaking of which, this is a linguistic concept. This is also a psychological concept. And in my kind of pre-research to get ready for this episode, read the Wikipedia page for Gestalt, psychological in parentheses. It wasn't happening. I can't explain it to you. I don't know what this is. And I have a degree in psychology. So anyways.
Yeah, it is a little confusing. And actually, before we started recording, I was like, Francie, I'm going to be leaning on you because I think I'm a little bit at the level of understanding of this where like in my mind, I get it and I can apply it to things. But like when you're like, oh, explain this in great detail to someone who knows nothing about it, I really struggle and I get confused. So,
and I am only ever slightly ahead of Maggie in this. So we're all suffering together, okay?
But we've done our research, we took some notes, and we're coming in with the informed SLP at our side. So hopefully this will help us help you understand Gestalt language processing. So
right. So within psychology, it refers to processing information, both visual, auditory, and linguistic, as wholes that are more than the sum of its parts. While in language, a gestalt is a multi-word chunk that a speaker hears, stores, and uses as a whole before having knowledge or awareness of its internal structure. It's important to note that Gestalt language processing was named and described by a linguist, Ann Peters, in 1983. She wrote a book and was taken up by an SLP scientist named Barry Prezant.
It looks like present is how I would present is how I would.
And so they are theorizing this as a model of language acquisition, right? So a language acquisition theory where a child acquires language, acquires gestalts as initial units of their language, and then they eventually break them down or mitigate them, kind of like a top-down approach to language, where I feel like a lot of language theories and a lot of language acquisition models that we're taught in grad school are bottom up, where we first hear the sounds, we put the sounds in syllables, we have words, those words have meaning, we put those with other words, now we have sentences. Wow. And this is the opposite of that as the language processing theory. And within this comes multiple other things, and I'm going to pull up our notes for that now, because the linguistic meaning, we have the Ann Peters definition of acquisition, but within that too, we also see things like delayed echolalia, which are when we have delayed, meaning the person is using them after the point of hearing it, but they're echoing utterances after certain gaps of time. Sometimes immediately, echolalia can happen immediately, but it also can happen after. And then we also have the word scripting, or I've also seen it used as like formulaic language, which is used synonymously with echolalia, but can also refer to the use of learned chunks of language that is applied as communication strategies. So like memorizing answers, or like small talk, when you have like a set response for small talk. We have in our notes, we compared let's see here. They're memorized parts of language which carry meaning but are more perfunctory, and formulaic speech, which is chunks of language that we use as chunks while basically aware of their internal structure. So we're also aware of the grammar that's happening inside of it. I feel like their description of delayed echolalia is not always aware of that kind of more complex grammar within the utterance, where scripting is a little bit more aware. We kept making jokes the whole time about scripts because everybody uses scripts. I was thinking about one of our examples to understand the difference between scripts and like gestalts, the psychological principle, right? And Maggie, I'm gonna let you take this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but actually, so there's a lot of terms that we're going through and trying to define here. And I know for my brain, it would be helpful to kind of get an example of each. That's maybe not all encompassing, but is like an example. So we were talking about like slang or memes or like internet speech, I suppose, that could be an example of scripting and gestalts. The example for the psychological definition of a gestalt is that one meme, and this is an audio format. So I'm going to describe a visual joke in an audio format, but I'll also try and find it and link it like in the description or something. But it's this really, really old meme of a picture of a calendar of the month of April. And then on the very last day in April, there's a picture of ramen noodles. And the joke is it's going to be May. And that, so the whole is a calendar page of the month of April with a picture of ramen noodles on it. The sum of those parts is it's making a joke about Justin Timberlake in the early 2000s when he had those bleach blonde ramen noodle curls. and he was in, oh gosh, now I'm really showing my age.
A
he
boy
was in
band.
Backstreet Boys.
I don't know.
He was in
NSYNC.
I don't
This
know.
is a Googleable
This is
fact.
embarrassing. Yeah.
Hold on.
But they have that song where he's like, "It's gonna be May," and he's trying to say
it was NSYNC. It was NSYNC.
It was NSYNC. Sorry, guys. I'm
so
Gen
don't
Z,
hate me for being a folk girly, okay? You don't listen to 2000s pop.
Don't hate me for being an indie folk girly over here. I was also like 4 when that song came out. But anyway, okay, yeah. So it's referencing in that song, the lyric is "It's gonna be me," but the way he says it and sings it, it sounds like he's saying it's gonna be May, like the month of May. So that's the joke. And it's a gestalt because that picture of the month of April with ramen noodles on the 30th is the whole, and the sum of those parts calls to mind this cultural knowledge of Justin Timberlake and this one specific lyric from one specific song that is supposed to make you think of the month of May.
Yeah, we wouldn't naturally get from ramen noodles to the month of May without the sum of all of those parts being, or the whole of that joke being greater than just ramen noodles in the month of May, right?
Yeah. Even if you know what ramen noodles are and you know what a calendar is, you're not going to get there without all of this other knowledge that's attached to it. So that's kind of an example of, for sure, the psychological definition of Gestalt, also kind of the linguistic one a little bit too, unless we're talking about, like when people talk about it as a noun, like when we're saying like, oh, that's a Gestalt, versus the process of language acquisition. An example of scripting or formulaic speech, we did kind of talk about small talk. So this would be like you're passing someone in the hallway at work and you go, "Hey, how's it going? Good, and you?" That's a script. We all have it memorized. We all use it every day. It is a memorized chunk of language. It carries meaning, but it is kind of perfunctory. Like it's not super, we are aware of that internal grammatical structure. Like if someone said it wrong, it would be weird, but it's not really about the individual words themselves, if that makes sense. Another example of this, really kind of any memorized common script, we said like the, if you've ever been to Catholic Mass, the like,
and with your spirit.
Yes, the Lord be with you and with your spirit. That call and response thing that's memorized, it carries meaning. We are aware of the internal structure, but it's meant to communicate a message that's part of a greater thing. It's not like not an original organic sentence every time. You know what I mean? Delayed echolalia.
I have a kiddo who uses a lot of echolalia, and I have a great example where he was really fixated on Cars 3, which a lot of kids are. But from that, one of the words that came out that I used to describe one of the things that he was doing was crash, right? And crash was so much fun. Oh my gosh, we crashed cars into walls, we crashed cars into tables, we crashed cars into carpet. Like we did so much with crashing. And then out of nowhere, like 8 weeks later, we were playing with paper airplanes, and a paper airplane flew and hit the wall, and he looked at me and he goes, oh, crash. And I was like, yes, we crashed.
Totally.
And yes. So that word came back after an amount of time to communicate something. So,
and like this is contrasted with immediate echolalia, which would be if I say to a student, okay, it's time to go to lunch, and they say, go to lunch. Okay, it's time to go to lunch. Go to lunch. They say it immediately after me, usually like with that same intonation or cadence. That's immediate echolalia. The kind of delayed version of that either would be like that crash story, or okay, it's time to go to lunch. And if the teacher a couple hours later said, all right, pack your things, and the kid goes, go to lunch, that would be like delayed. So it's still echoing kind of in the same scenario, but it's not immediately after it was heard. Clear as mud.
So why are we talking about this, Maggie?
Well, like I said before, there is a lot of buzz about this online. You and I have both seen SLPs claiming to be GLP practitioners, GLP experts, even people that are kind of really well versed and knowledgeable about this means of language acquisition. And I think that it kind of coincides with this moment we're having right now in the neurodiversity affirming movement and space, along with the availability of more information about autism and language learning differences. That's all kind of coming together to make this a really popular topic right now. So lots of people are just talking about it. I see reels about it every single day. So that's one reason that we wanted to.
There's one reason to talk about it. I also, coming from like a personal standpoint, had a little bit of confusion, for lack of a better term, about what the term Gestalt actually meant, whether, and this is why we're kind of defining these terms, whether that was talking about the process of whether that was talking to the scripts that a person was using, or whether that was the actual like theorized process of language acquisition. And so to me, it really helps to get kind of squared away what exactly it is we're talking about when we're talking about Gestalt language processing.
And like Francie said before, these are relatively new concepts. So as with anything that kind of gets really popular online and is also kind of new, sometimes people will take a ball and like really run with it. And as much as I've seen really good information about GLPs and Gestalts in general online, I've also seen information that I'm thinking to myself, well, like, wait, that doesn't line up with what I know about it. Or even people talking about it like it's its own diagnosis or like it's its own learning style, and it's kind of getting the pop psychology treatment in some spaces too. So yeah, we definitely wanted to clear the air, but also for our own edification, do a bit of a deep dive.
So one of the interesting things that in just reading these articles from the Informed SLP that I don't see, I feel like, in the sphere of communication is in the articles, it talks about how Gestalt language processing is controversial. Like, people are like, no, that's not a thing. And I feel like I don't see a lot of that conversation online as much as I see that about other topics now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, do
And
you
allegedly,
have... Yes, I think I know what you're saying, but do you have like an example of it, or like maybe
so in the 2024 article, it's talking about ASHA's, like the ASHA shuffle, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back is their conversation. And how it's difficult to parse through this. And then apparently something happened at an ASHA convention where 2 people who had 2 papers that were kind of coming to different conclusions about Gestalt language processing presented back to back at ASHA. Ooh. And so I'm reading this article.
Confrontation in the
Right.
SLP world.
Yeah. And how members of the Informed SLP editorial staff attended both of these talks. We'll leave the post-mortems to Reddit. But suffice to say, hello again. Anyways, all that to say, we think these presentations undermine the goals of promoting healthy skepticism and de-implementing of GLP by not centering their most important arguments, but instead overemphasizing their own tinfuls of red herrings and considering their large mixed audience and how certain statements. So they're saying that the people who came out like against it were not making great arguments at ASHA. I love when we have really niche drama in our field like this. Yes. Something about it just makes me like like
it's like those reels that are like stumbling upon a new community and discovering the niche drama within that, where like they're like, not everybody can afford a silicone mermaid tail. Like
literally. Sometimes you have to deal with neoprene, okay? Like it's like that.
And
you're like, oh, I didn't realize this was.
This is only important to us, but man, if it's not important.
Are we going crazy about it? So as I'm sitting here, I'm kind of reviewing the article again just to get my own thoughts, and I'm like, oh, this was an issue apparently.
Dang. My personal experience with it has been either people don't know what it is or
Mhm.
they really gung-ho for it, like
Yes.
all for it.
I feel like the conversations I've been having have not been positive v negative, it's been indifference or unawareness versus, like, positive.
Yes, same. Yeah. And then, yeah, full disclosure, I don't know, we can remove this part if you want, but like full disclosure, we both kind of had a moment last school year where we were like, wait, is this real? Or like, is
It
this
has
fake
always
news?
Yeah, no, it's always been presented to me as like, "Oh, no, this is just the way things are, this is the truth," and anytime something
Mhm.
gets presented to me that way, I'm immediately like, "Hey, wait a second," because 'cause I'm a skeptic at heart, and so it was through these articles with the Informed SLP that I was like, "Oh, no, it has, like, a burgeoning evidence base, and it's more" how I've interpreted this as has been more of like, "Oh, no, this is a language processing theory that can help me guide the ways that I structure therapy versus like this is the way, the truth and the light question mark question mark question mark.
Totally.
So
Yes. Yeah. So there, and actually, that makes me think of one of the takeaways that I really liked from the Informed SLP article, which was it's unclear whether it makes sense to talk about kids either as Gestalt language processors or conversely analytic language processors, because in reality, it's probably not that clear cut.
yeah.
So we have this kind of, to what you were saying, we have this language processing theory that has value to it and has a burgeoning evidence base. But, and this is the kind of like when I was saying online, people like to take a ball and run with it. It is not gospel truth, so to speak. And it's
Well, and it's
probably not even helpful all the time to put kids into one of two camps.
And it's not all or nothing. I feel like
Mhm.
online a lot, we see a lot of conversations be reduced to all or nothing style debates where you're either GLP or nothing, you do this thing or nothing. And quite frankly, I just don't think that's true. And so I think it's important to consider that their language processing, a student's language processing might be different because they're autistic. But I also think it's important. And one of the things that I like the article talking about was you can be you can non-allistic children, here we go. Allistic children can also be Gestalt language processing style communicators and take these whole chunks of language and use them even if they're not autistic. And so I see this being used to apply to one specific group of people that we work with. And while I think it's important to discuss that, I also think it's important to know that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle when it comes to language processing theories. And so, yeah, they can be using things like scripts and delayed echolalia, but are they moving through the theorized hierarchy as described in Gestalt language processing theory? I don't know, because some kids don't do that. They don't, and the theory proposes you have to move these through these specific steps. Steps cannot be skipped. And I see kids sometimes skipping. Well, they'll go from like using whole scripts to boom. Now we are putting together what would be described as like mitigated phrases, or like they're making their own sentences absent of scripts question mark or like the gestalts part. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yes.
That's where I'm at.
Which, to just directly quote from the Informed SLP article, this one is the more recent one, still gestalting after all these years. They say, second, remember that two things can be true. We can believe that GLP is a useful clinical concept and acknowledge that a different term might be better, which it might be. This kind of burgeoning awareness of these different processing styles. There may be like a secret third thing that we don't know about yet, you know? We can GLP/NLA, that's that naturalistic language acquisition concepts, helpful in working with and understanding autistic children. And we can acknowledge the gaps in the evidence and that the scientific process can and should move our understanding forward. And for me, I'm like heavy on that piece. Like, I think that we should acknowledge that this can be helpful when working with kids who are on the spectrum, but it's not the end all be all. And yeah, like we should be relying on the scientific process to do its job and to give us really solid, robust evidence. Then they go on to say we can support autistic people and express reasonable skepticism about theoretical frameworks on theoretical and empirical grounds. So like this, we're saying it's new. There's not a ton of research out there about it. And then finally, we can appreciate echolalia / formulaic speech / scripting / gestalt as a valid form of communication. And we can debate the exact cognitive forces at play in their use. Because another thing that we didn't really get into with all of this stuff is that in the past, echolalia has been almost completely disregarded as like empty speech or useless speech.
That's the way it was taught to me in grad school. It was like echolalia is empty. It doesn't have communicative functions. And through my own practice, I'm like, I don't agree with that. I find kids who use echolalia to use it for a variety of functions, some of which is self-regulatory and is so it's not quote unquote meaningful, but regulatory purposes can still be meaningful. And so
it's meaningful, but it might not be communicative.
That's the good distinction there. Yes, it might not be meaningful, but it might not be, it is meaningful, but not communicative.
I think I was definitely taught, like formally taught a more maybe balanced view of it, of that a lot of times echolalia is just repeating stuff and it is not communicative, but it also can be. And from my clinical practice, I do feel like that is kind of the case. I would say that it can absolutely be communicative. And I definitely lean on the like, I assume echolalia is communicating something unless proven otherwise. But sometimes it's just like a kid is singing that song because they really like that song, or they're saying that phrase because they really like how it sounds and they just are saying it over and over. It's regulating, it's fun for them, they like it, but they're not trying to tell you something with it. And that's something that allistic kids do too. And allistic adults, we've all had stuff stuck in our heads that we'll just say sometimes because it's fun and it's satisfying. So I think it is true that echolalia can absolutely be both. And it's not fair to say it's either always a gestalt or it's always like meaningless, you know? Oh yeah, we can. Also, I do think it is fair to debate the exact cognitive forces at play, because we don't know what's going on in the heads of young autistic children who are learning to communicate. We don't always know exactly why they are saying the things that they are saying. Sometimes it's really hard to tell if, like sometimes you do, if you kind of honor echolalia as communicative and you know, crack the code, so to speak, you get a big reaction and you know that you understood them and that like you got it right. And that's really great. But then sometimes you don't. Sometimes they just kind of remain neutral and you don't get a big reaction either way.
Or alternatively, you get a negative reaction and they're like, get out of my scripting, lady. And they're like, no, what are you doing? You're messing up you're messing it up, lady.
I've had that happen to me where a kid will start singing something and then I start singing with them, or I'll bring out like, I'll start doing like, if it's head, shoulders, knees, and toes, I'll start doing it like myself or on a toy or whatever. And they give me the biggest stink eye of like, that was not an invitation. Like you're not, I'm singing right now. Like you're not invited to this. And so, yeah, sometimes you get that big reaction and then sometimes they're just pretty neutral on it. And you're not sure if that was necessarily communicative or if they were just singing that song because they wanted to. So yeah, it's okay to wonder those things. It doesn't make you a not neurodiversity affirming therapist to acknowledge that sometimes echolalia is not necessarily communicative.
I think one of my favorite takeaways from this article was the second to last point, which is to hold our field to a higher standard of discourse. And I feel like this is true for not just the concept of GLP, but also some of the other things that we see in this field is just to have good, honest, respectful communication about things that are happening in our field right now, whether they be controversial or not. And, we got to consult our evidence base and act with trust that people who are doing things differently than us are doing them for the benefit. And we need to have respectful conversations in order to best help all of the people that we work with.
Yeah, I think that it's really easy sometimes as SLPs who a lot of us are very passionate about what we do and who we work with, it's easy sometimes to get caught up in our own, like the emotions of our own arguments, the emotions of our own, I guess, topics and things that we're dealing with. But yeah, I would totally agree with you. I think that skepticism of new stuff is healthy. We have gotten it wrong a lot in the past, so it's not always the least, dangerous option to just jump into a new thing because it makes sense intuitively. Like it's good to kind of sit back and be a little skeptical at first. I also think that in our conversations as SLPs, especially online and with other people, we should be putting our master's degrees to good use. Like we should be putting our education level to work. We have to be using those clinical thinking skills. We have to be using those critical thinking skills and our ability to read and parse research and understand these complex topics. And we should be holding each other to that standard as well. So yeah. So I guess So I guess those are kind of our favorite takeaways from what the Informed SLP has to say. The Informed SLP remains our girl. We love that website. It's amazing. But what are your kind of individual takeaways from this, France?
Yeah, I am somebody who will present this as a language processing theory and will allow that to kind of help me shape what therapy looks like. But I'm reluctant to slap a label on somebody that's gestalty if I'm not talking to another SLP, because I think that can lead to a lot of confusion with parents about what that means, specifically when we've got sometimes we work with really complex kids who have a lot of diagnoses. And so to hear one more thing about their kid that instead of just describing their communication as the way they're communicating, to use another term can be kind of stressful. And so when I'm writing IEPs or when I'm writing up progress notes about how a student is communicating, I'm not probably going to use the term student is a Gestalt language processor, but I am going to say student is using scripts to communicate. These are the scripts that they are using. They are doing things meaningfully, purposefully, all of that stuff, and give a better picture that way and describe exactly what they're doing as opposed to putting just one label on them for communication. Because even within the term Gestalt language processing, I feel like a lot of kids can look very different in that too. And so to me, the best way to communicate with other parents or professionals about a student's communication would be describing exactly what they're doing. But in colloquial terms with another SLP, I might say, oh, he's a little gestalty or something like that. But I'm definitely going to use it more as a framework as opposed to like a diagnostic thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say that's, in my opinion, really appropriate. I think you kind of have to know your audience and know when another label might just know when it's going to help or hurt. One of my takeaways from this is that I really worry about GLP getting pop psych treatment of like this becoming something that a lot of people know a little bit about and just kind of are handing out GLP labels willy-nilly. So it is a useful clinical framework for SLPs, but I don't want this to go the way of like learning styles, which I don't know if we're kicking the hornet's nest on this one, but like you and I know that learning styles are not real. So like
I feel really bad because I bite my tongue sometimes when people are like, oh, this is their learning style. And I'm like,
and that like, oh, he's a visual learner, she's an auditory learner, she's a blah, blah, blah. That's not, everybody learns all the ways. Yes. You may have one that
you might have preferences.
You might have a preference or one that you feel is easier for you. But definitely it's not like we can sort people into bins based on learning style, even though a lot of people try to do that. That's not evidence-based. It's not a thing. And so I worry about GLP kind of going the way of learning styles of like, oh, well, this toddler is a GLP. This toddler is an analytic processor. Like I don't want that to happen because I think this can be really useful, but I don't want it to get, I don't want it to eat its own tail. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair.
So yeah, I'm a little, my head is full of information.
Yeah. If you don't have an informed SLP account, it is worth the money. I feel like the articles that they give really do help to get me the information I need, like about Gestalt Language Processing. This is not an ad for them. I just really like them.
The Informed SLP, please sponsor us.
We love you.
We love you. Yeah, some of the things are free to share. These articles, we would link if they were free to share. I don't think that they are. So I think in the past we have maybe talked about
sometimes they have free printable resources with articles. It just depends on the article.
Yeah. But yes, if you are listening to this and you're an SLP, I agree. I think that the Informed SLP is definitely worth it. I pay for 2 of the age groups and I love it. It's awesome. So yeah, go for it. And please sponsor us, the Informed SLP. If you have questions, comments, or any additional thoughts about this topic, please feel free to comment below our video on YouTube, or you can also leave comments on Spotify if you didn't know. But let us know what you think, because this is kind of, it falls into that like hot button or like really popular topic that lots of people are talking about and lots of people may have strong feelings about. So yeah, but until next time, this has been Tell Me About It. We are available on YouTube and Spotify at Tell Me About It and SLP Podcast. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Tell Me About It SLP. We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.